This is the story of an empty line on a payroll sheet, a single missing signature that signaled the total collapse of a 30-year illusion. Behind closed doors at the Duchy of Cornwall, Prince William did not shout. He did not issue a dramatic press release. He simply looked at a financial document, picked up a pen, and quietly erased the name of the woman who had helped destroy his mother. What Queen Camilla realized in that chilling, silent moment was that the crown on her head offered zero protection against the man who actually owned the money. In a matter of days, what looked like a routine administrative update was actually a total dismantling of her empire. This is the forensic breakdown of Camilla's secret attempt to weave her non-royal family permanently into the British monarchy, how Prince William systematically uncovered the paper trail, and the silent, ruthless retaliation that stripped her of everything she thought she controlled. By the end of this, you will understand the devastating realization currently echoing through Camilla's private chambers. The realization that despite the titles, the curtsies, and the historical triumph of her coronation, she actually owns nothing. To understand the sheer magnitude of William's strike, you have to step back and look at the fortress Camilla believed she had built. For 3 decades, she played the most patient calculating game in modern royal history. She survived public outrage, erased the lingering shadow of Princess Diana, and elevated herself from a despised mistress to the Queen of England. But her ambition did not stop at her own survival. She wanted absolute institutional permanence. She systematically pushed to elevate her non-royal children, her friends, and her family members, granting them proximity to the crown and all the lucrative benefits that come with it. She believed she had Charles completely controlled. She believed the system would protect her bloodline forever. She felt utterly untouchable. Nowhere was this illusion of absolute power more evident than in the case of her younger sister, Annabel Elliot. To the outside world, Annabel was a polished, respected interior designer. She sat in the royal box at Wimbledon. She smiled warmly in official royal documentaries. She'd been so deeply woven into the fabric of palace life that most people had completely stopped asking how she got there in the first place, but William never stopped asking. Annabel was handed a highly lucrative role managing the interior design of the Duchy of Cornwall properties directly after Charles married Camilla in 2005. The Duchy is one of the most powerful private estates in Britain. It is worth over $1 billion. It generates tens of millions every single year, funding the heir to the throne and controlling a vast network of properties stretching across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. For nearly 2 decades, Annabel Elliot quietly collected steady payments from this massive institutional machine. The funds flowed directly from the estate of the future king into the pockets of Camilla's sister. William knew exactly how and why she got that contract, and that detail matters. Annabel did not get that job because of her unmatched design skills. She got it as a reward for her silence, her loyalty, and her active participation in the darkest chapter of William's childhood. Annabel's country home in Dorset was one of the primary locations Charles and Camilla used for their secret meetings during the affair years. While Diana was at home with 2 small boys watching her marriage cave in around her, sinking into deep depression and fighting just to survive the pressure of the palace, Charles was quietly making his way to Annabel's house. But Annabel was not simply a woman who opened her door and politely looked away. What she did was far worse than passive complicity. According to historical accounts from those years, there was one particular evening when Charles arrived at Annabel's home, completely furious over something Diana had done. He was snapping at everyone, bringing the toxic anger of his failing marriage straight through the door. Camilla could not calm him down. It was Annabel who stepped in. She physically grabbed her sister by the shoulders, looked her dead in the eyes, and told her that Diana did not even come close to her. Then she pushed Camilla toward the bedroom door and closed it behind her. Her house, her bedroom, her hands physically pushing her sister toward another woman's husband. This was not a woman who reluctantly tolerated something uncomfortable happening nearby. This was a woman who looked at the staggering emotional collapse of a young mother and decided her sister's ambition was entirely worth it. She chose the affair over basic human decency. And when the dust settled, when Diana was gone and Camilla had taken the title, Annabel walked straight into a royal contract funded by the very institution Diana had bled for. William was 11 years old when the infamous Tampon Gate transcripts were published, revealing the full grotesque extent of his father's affair. He read the same newspapers the rest of the world read. He saw the list of friends and family members who had conspired to hide the betrayal. He knew exactly what Annabel had done, and yet as a boy he had no power to stop any of it. He sat inside a life he could not escape and watched his mother be systematically dismantled by a network of aristocrats who felt absolutely no remorse. As the years passed, William carried that pain quietly. He watched Annabel collect her duchy checks. He watched her sit on national television in a 2023 BBC documentary, looking straight into the camera and calling Camilla completely loyal. A woman who facilitated a decade-long affair, sitting on television, defining loyalty while being paid by William's family estate. Something deeply final settled inside William in that moment. The boy who could do nothing was gone. The man who was about to inherit the earth had arrived. In September 2022, Queen Elizabeth passed away, and the billion-dollar Duchy of Cornwall landed squarely in William's hands. The properties, the income, the contracts, the payroll, all of it was now under his absolute jurisdiction. William looked at that payroll like a man who had been waiting a lifetime for this exact administrative transition. He did not scream. He did not confront Charles. He utilized the cold, devastating weapon of administrative protocol. When the 2024 Duchy of Cornwall annual report was released, a single glaring omission caught the eye of forensic financial analysts. Annabel Elliot was gone. William had removed her from the payroll without breathing a word to the press. There was no graceful transition period. There was no public acknowledgement of her 20 years of service. There was just an abrupt, permanent cessation of funds. Palace sources desperately tried to cushion the blow, leaking weak statements that it was no reflection on her work. But everyone inside the gates knew exactly what it was. It was a cold, direct message to every single person in Camilla's circle that the era of staggering exploitation was over. The protection they had enjoyed under Charles was finished. William was not going to spend one single penny of his inheritance funding the woman who had opened her home to destroy his mother. It was a flawless execution of silent revenge. William used the system to dismantle Camilla's shadow empire without ever raising his voice. For Camilla, this was a moment of absolute terror. The illusion of power she had so carefully maintained was shattering. She suddenly understood the terrifying reality of her position. She is the queen, but she is entirely dependent on a man who remembers everything and forgives nothing. William's silent financial strike exposed her profound commercial desperation. She controls no real institutional wealth. The estates the sovereign grants, the private duchies all answer to blood, and she has none in the royal line. But severing Annabel was only the opening move. As Camilla panicked, realizing the walls were closing in, the ghosts of the past were violently dragged back into the daylight. Camilla's ex-husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, suddenly reappeared at official royal events representing Princess Anne. His presence brought the entire dark history of the open marriage, the covered affairs, and the psychological warfare against Diana sitting in plain view once again. Princess Anne, a fierce protector of the crown, was quietly aligning the chess pieces. Cornered, stripped of her financial safety nets, and watching William methodically dismantle her influence, Camilla realized she was trapped. In a moment of sheer desperation, she stopped trying to appease William and made the most catastrophic miscalculation of her entire life. She turned her sights on the one person William would burn the monarchy to the ground to protect. She aimed her venom at Catherine, and that is where the story changes forever. There is one fundamental truth about Prince William that royal insiders have understood for years. He is profoundly patient. He is capable of carrying deep historical pain without letting it break his public composure. He can sit at the same table as his enemies smile for the cameras and fulfill his constitutional duties without a single crack in the armor. But there is one line that, when crossed, instantly transforms that quiet control into absolute unforgiving retaliation. That line is Catherine. She is the one person in his life he will not allow anyone to touch. Not with palace rumors, not with subtle disrespect, and certainly not with the calculated cruelty Camilla had spent a lifetime perfecting. By late 2025, the tension between Camilla and Catherine had become impossible to conceal. Camilla was acutely aware of the shifting sands beneath her feet. Behind closed doors, her territorial anxiety was escalating. The reason was brutally simple. The moment Charles passes and William ascends to the throne, Catherine becomes queen. In that exact fraction of a second, Camilla loses her central role. Her unlimited funding, her elite status, and her access to the levers of power. Everything she fought for over 3 decades evaporates. Driven by this looming reality, Camilla began a subtle campaign of making things difficult for Catherine, desperately trying to assert dominance before her time ran out. The boiling point arrived in September 2025, playing out in front of the entire world. Even if most viewers did not fully grasp the gravity of the footage. During a highly publicized state visit at Windsor Castle with President Trump and Melania, The senior royals were lined up in strict protocol order. William and Catherine greeted the Trumps, first falling into a warm, natural conversation. Then Camilla approached. Feeling the spotlight shifting, Camilla executed a sharp, dismissive hand gesture, physically waving Catherine out of the way. On camera in front of visiting heads of state and global journalists, the future Queen of England was waved aside like a staff member standing in the wrong place. William watched that gesture happen in real time, and his response was a masterclass in the weaponization of protocol. Later in that same visit, when William greeted Camilla, he bypassed the deeply ingrained rules of royal hierarchy. Traditionally, when approaching the Queen, William would bow his head as a formal acknowledgement of her sovereign rank. He did not bow. He offered her 2 quick, casual kisses on the cheek. The exact kind of dismissive greeting you would give a distant acquaintance, and simply walked past her. To an untrained eye, it looked perfectly polite. In the royal ecosystem, where every micro-expression is recorded and every deviation from protocol is a declaration of war, it was a deafening siren. It was a silent, lethal message delivered without a single word. Panicked by William's chilling detachment, Camilla instinctively turned to the one strategy that had always saved her. She turned to Charles. For 30 years, Charles had been her ultimate shield. He had screamed at his advisors, alienated his public, and broken his own family just to force the world to accept her. Camilla expected him to intervene to reprimand William to re-establish her absolute authority. But what she met instead was a devastating silence. Charles, battling a severe cancer diagnosis and carrying the immense physical toll of the crown, was a weakened king. More importantly, he knew what Camilla refused to accept. William now held the billion-dollar duchy. William held the future. Charles could no longer afford to wage war against his own heir just to soothe his wife's insecurities. When Charles refused to step in, Camilla experienced the true psychological climax of her royal life. She was entirely on her own. This realization triggered a profound commercial desperation. Deprived of the king's absolute protection, Camilla finally looked at her financial reality, and the math was terrifying. She does not receive a separate personal income from the British state. Her entire existence is funded through the sovereign grant, which answers directly to the reigning monarch. When William becomes king, he controls that grant entirely. He owns the estates, he owns the properties, he holds the keys to the kingdom. In late February 2026, driven by raw survival instinct, Queen Camilla executed a maneuver that forced royal analysts to stop and read the legal filings twice. She quietly signed a power of attorney document transferring full ownership of Raymill House, her private country estate in Wiltshire, directly to her non-royal children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. Camilla bought that property in 1996 using the divorce settlement from her first husband. It is her sanctuary. It is the only place in the world that is entirely hers. On the surface, the palace tried to wave this off as sensible estate planning for an aging monarch, but those who understood the invisible war knew the truth. This transfer was an act of pure terror. By moving her most valuable private asset out of her own name, Camilla was hiding it from the institution. She knew that when Charles is gone, William will have the power to evict her from royal residences. Palace officials had already leaked that she would not be granted royal lodge. Raymill House was her only guaranteed refuge, by legally transferring it to her children before William took the throne. She was desperately trying to place her final safety net beyond his administrative reach. It was the ultimate admission of defeat. She was securing a lifeboat because she knew the ship was sinking. The tragedy of Camilla's final chapter is that her desperation has become so palpable that even her own bloodline is quietly backing away. In December 2025, highly aware of her growing isolation within the palace walls, Camilla personally called her son, Tom Parker Bowles, and pleaded with him to spend Christmas at Sandringham. The Queen of England begged her own son to stand by her side for the holidays. His response, which rapidly made its way into the press, was completely devoid of warmth. He publicly stated that he and his sister would not be attending, choosing instead to spend the holiday on a sofa at his ex-wife's house. Tom and Laura grew up inside this toxic history. They can read the institutional room. They can see the silent machinery of William and Catherine systematically erasing their mother's influence. By refusing the Sandringham invitation, Camilla's children were repositioning themselves for the inevitable new order. They were leaving her to face the consequences alone. What we are witnessing now is the total restoration of a legacy that Camilla spent her entire adult life trying to bury. Catherine is stepping firmly into her power, unbothered by the fading, erratic behavior of a queen with an expiration date. The subtle shifts are everywhere. Diana's favorite jewels are appearing more frequently. Protocol changes are elevating the Wales family, while Camilla's non-royal relatives are being systematically scrubbed from the VIP lists. The boy who walked behind his mother's coffin at 15 years old, forced to mourn in front of the world, while the architects of his mother's misery stood comfortably in the shadows, has grown up. He did not become paranoid. He did not become reckless. He became the most powerful man in Britain. He learned how the institution works, and now he is using its cold, undeniable mechanics to dismantle the illusion Camilla spent decades building. William simply tolerates her presence because the clock is on his side. Camilla got the title, the crown, and the coronation. But as she sits in the palace today, stripped of her allies, legally hiding her private home, and watching her family pull away, she's paralyzed by one terrifying reality. The title is just an illusion. William owns the reality, and his reign has already begun. If you found this deep dive into the hidden power dynamics of the royal family insightful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next forensic breakdown. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on William's silent strategy, and we will see you in the next video.